Have you ever stood in a crowd, surrounded by the hum of supposed contentment, yet felt a profound and unsettling silence within your own spirit? Have you ever watched the world play out its dramas, its triumphs, and its tragedies, and felt as though you were witnessing a grand, theatrical performance, one where the actors themselves are unaware that they are reading from a script? This feeling, this deep-seated perception of a reality just beneath the surface, is not a sign of madness or disconnection. It is the first stirring of a profound awakening, a signal from your higher self that you are beginning to perceive the unseen architecture of the world. You are starting to see the invisible currents that shape our lives, our societies, and our very definition of peace. If this resonates with the deepest chambers of your being, know that you are not alone. Acknowledge this connection by liking this message, subscribing to this channel for more profound truths, and share your awakening in the comments below with a simple, "I see it now." Your voice is a beacon for others who are beginning to open their eyes. At the heart of this hidden architecture lies a timeless and often misunderstood principle, a key forged in the crucible of human power by the master strategist Niccolò Machiavelli. He wrote in his seminal work, The Prince, "Men are driven by two principal impulses, either by love or by fear." This is not merely a cynical observation on politics. It is a spiritual key that unlocks the very mechanics of control and order in our world. For centuries, we have been taught to yearn for a peace built on love, on mutual goodwill, on a spontaneous harmony that arises from the goodness of the human heart. We hold this ideal up as the pinnacle of civilization, a sacred goal to which all of humanity must aspire. But what if I told you that this peace, the peace you see in the orderly procession of daily life, in the functioning of nations, and even in the quiet corridors of your own mind, is an illusion? What if it is not a gift bestowed by love, but a masterpiece of engineering constructed from the raw, potent energy of fear? What if the tranquility we cherish is, in fact, a carefully crafted and meticulously maintained stage where every actor is guided not by affection, but by a profound and often unconscious understanding of consequence? Let us dare to pull back the curtain on this performance. The word peace itself sounds noble, a frequency of serenity and light. We see it printed on banners, a desperate cry shouted in the streets during protests, a gentle concept taught to children in classrooms. It is presented as the highest ideal, the natural state to which we must return. But this is a profound misdirection. The peace we glorify, the kind that allows for commerce and society to function, is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It is a carefully crafted illusion, a delicate equilibrium maintained not by the ephemeral and fickle nature of love, but by the far more reliable and potent force of strategic manipulation. It is a peace born from the mastery of perception. Consider for a moment, what if real, lasting peace is not the absence of conflict, but the absolute triumph of strategy over chaos? What if the quiet hum of society is not the sound of harmony, but the sound of a perfectly tuned engine, an engine whose hidden gears and levers are operated by hands that few ever see? This is not a call to despair, but a call to awaken to the truth of power. To understand this is to move from being a pawn in the game to a student of its design. The first step in your own spiritual liberation is to see the world not as you wish it were, but as it truly is. Machiavelli, a name so often shrouded in darkness and associated with pure evil, did not believe in fairy tales. His genius was not in cruelty, but in his ruthless, unwavering clarity. He was a master of perceiving the universal laws that govern human interaction, and he dared to write them down without the sweet poison of idealism. He looked at the world as a grand, intricate mechanism, a clockwork of ambition, desire, and, most importantly, fear. And in his ruthless clarity, in his refusal to be naive, he revealed a truth so profound, so unsettling, that most people are still, to this day, unwilling to accept it. He understood that behind every seemingly peaceful society, every stable institution, every orderly family, there lies a silent, invisible architecture of control. This control is not always wielded with an iron fist. In fact, its most effective form is subtle, almost imperceptible. It is the control of narrative, the manipulation of belief, the mastery of perception. He taught that if you truly want peace, you must first learn to manipulate. This is not a call to embrace evil. It is a divine call to understand the hidden gears that move the world, to see the blueprint of power so that you are no longer a victim of its design, but a conscious participant in your own destiny. Machiavelli's true genius lies not in promoting cruelty, but in his profound refusal to be blinded by the comforting lies we tell ourselves about our own nature. In today's hyper-connected world, where influence is the ultimate currency and perception is everything, these ancient lessons are not just relevant. They are absolutely essential for anyone seeking not just survival, but genuine empowerment. Most people, in their programmed state, confuse manipulation with malice. They recoil at the word, believing it to be inherently evil, a tool of darkness. But this is a child's understanding of a master's tool. At its core, manipulation is nothing more than influence with direction. It is strategy in motion. It is the art of knowing what others want, what they fear, and what they believe, and using that understanding to guide their choices toward a desired outcome. Think of every advertisement you have ever seen, every persuasive political speech you have ever heard, every carefully curated social media post that has ever stirred your emotions. They are all acts of manipulation, intricate plays upon your own psychology, and yet we do not blink. We consume it, we accept it, we even participate in it. What we reject is not the act itself, but the honesty of naming it. We live in a world saturated with manipulation, yet we pretend it does not exist. Machiavelli was honest. In his eyes, the one who seeks to lead, to stabilize, to protect their people from the ravages of chaos, must understand human nature not as it should be, but as it truly is. A tempest of self-interest, raw emotion, and reactive impulses. And if people are, at their core, emotional creatures, then logic alone will never be enough to guide them. Reason is a weak and flickering candle in the hurricane of human passion. But stories will guide them, symbols will move them, appearances will convince them. He who controls the image, the narrative, the perception of reality, is the one who truly controls the mind. And he who controls the mind is the one who creates peace not by the brute force of a sword, but by the far more enduring power of belief. This is the sacred art of governance, the hidden wisdom of kings and queens, and the secret key to building an order that lasts. It is the understanding that true power does not command bodies, it shapes souls. It does not enforce obedience, it engineers consent. This profound truth forms the very bedrock of stable civilization, and to ignore it is to condemn oneself to a life of reacting to the world, rather than consciously creating it. The very essence of this strategic peace is a radical departure from the passive, hopeful, wishing that defines most modern approaches to harmony. It is an active, surgical, and deeply psychological art form. This manipulation isn't just a grand strategy for tyrants or politicians. It's a fundamental dynamic that is happening at every level of your life, right now. You manipulate your own schedule to get the most done, carefully arranging tasks to create a feeling of accomplishment and control. You manipulate your tone of voice in a difficult conversation to avoid an argument, softening your words to guide the emotional energy of the room. You manipulate your own image when you dress for an important meeting, selecting clothes that project confidence and competence, thereby shaping how others perceive and react to you. These are not sinister acts. They are acts of strategy. Sometimes this strategy is for survival. Sometimes it is for wisdom. The line between them is defined only by intent and awareness. The world is a chessboard, and every interaction is a move. Those who refuse to see the game are not morally superior. They are simply the pieces being moved by others. Machiavelli never advocated for cruelty without cause. That is the mark of a fool, a brute who mistakes violence for power. He taught that if cruelty is to be used, it must be like a surgeon's scalpel, swift, precise, memorable, and never, ever repeated. Why? Because vague, lingering cruelty breeds hatred and rebellion. It creates a festering wound of resentment that will inevitably erupt into chaos. but a single, decisive, and surgically applied act of force. That creates a fear that is sharp enough to prevent chaos from ever taking root. It establishes a boundary, a clear understanding of consequence that makes disorder an unattractive option. In this way, manipulation becomes a scalpel, not a hammer. And when peace is the ultimate goal, the scalpel is always more effective. It cuts away the diseased part of the system without destroying the whole. It is the difference between a controlled burn that allows a forest to regenerate and a wildfire that consumes everything in its path. True power understands this distinction. It does not revel in destruction. It uses the threat of destruction to preserve order. It is a paradox that the naive cannot comprehend. To secure peace, one must be fully prepared and fully capable of executing decisive war. This understanding extends to the very structure of our modern world. Modern peacekeeping isn't about everyone joining hands and singing in harmony. That is a fantasy. It is about the cold, calculated management of competing interests. It is a complex dance of leverage, propaganda, economic pressure, and intelligence gathering. The most powerful nations in the world do not achieve peace through love. They achieve it by creating a reality in which conflict with them is simply too costly. They manipulate the playing field itself, not just the players upon it. They shape the flow of money, the spread of information, and the narratives that define friends and enemies. They understand that the illusion of choice is the most powerful tool for keeping a population content. Give people the sensation of freedom, and they will rarely demand the real thing. Let them speak, as long as their words do not translate into action. Let them vote, as long as the options they are given have already been chosen for them. Let them believe they are in control, and they will willingly police themselves. Machiavelli would not be surprised by this system. In fact, he would admire its elegant efficiency. He would see it as the inevitable outcome of any intelligent power that truly understands that peace cannot be sustained without control. The wise leader, the true prince in the Machiavellian sense, must know when to hide the sword behind the smile. He must understand the profound truth in the statement that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Why? Because love is an emotion, and emotions are fickle. They change with the seasons, with circumstances, with moods. Love is a bond built on feeling, but fear, in its most strategic form, is a bond built on the rational calculation of self-preservation. It is consistent, a reputation for decisive and overwhelming force, even a force that is never used, is a far more reliable pillar upon which to build a lasting order than the shifting sands of public affection. The populace may love you today and call for your head tomorrow, but a healthy respect for your power, for the consequences of defying you, endures. This isn't about terrorizing the public. It's about creating a psychological environment where compliance is the most logical and beneficial choice. Fear, in this context, is not a blunt instrument of oppression. It is the invisible fence that keeps the sheep from wandering into the path of wolves. But fear, too, must be manipulated with the utmost care. If it is too intense, it breeds hatred, and a people united by hatred will eventually find the courage to revolt, no matter the cost. If it is too soft, it loses its edge, breeding contempt and inviting challenge. The true art of the manipulator lies in this delicate balance. It is found in the controlled chaos that feels like order, in a peace that looks like freedom but is, in fact, engineered through a web of unspoken pressures and incentives. This is why those who desire true, lasting peace must learn not just to dominate, but to shape, not just to lie, but to direct the truth, not just to control, but to influence. The masses, Machiavelli understood, do not truly want the terrifying burden of absolute freedom. They want comfort. They want security. And security, in any form, always requires a degree of control. The genius of a lasting system is in making that control feel like a choice, a comfort, a protection, rather than a cage. The master ruler doesn't need to lock the cage door if he has convinced the inhabitants that the world outside is far more dangerous than the world within. This is the very essence of psychological engineering, the refinement of manipulation into culture itself. The ultimate truth is that no one truly wants total freedom. for it carries the unbearable weight of total responsibility. It terrifies them. Freedom without guidance is chaos, and human beings, at their deepest level, are creatures who instinctively seek the stability of order. They crave the illusion of control, not the actual burden of it. That is why they so readily follow influences, why they eagerly join movements, why they willingly surrender their own critical thought in favor of a comforting, pre-packaged ideology. They don't want to think, they want to belong. The true manipulator understands this deep, primal yearning and offers identity in exchange for obedience. It's a trade that most people are desperate to make. Give them a team, a slogan, a common enemy, and they will forget they are being led. The peace they feel isn't from autonomy, it's from the certainty of their place within the system. They're not truly free, but they feel safe. And safety, as Machiavelli knew, is the true currency of power. The manipulator, then, doesn't need to rule with an iron fist. He simply engineers the incentives, creates the narratives, and shapes the environment in a way that makes the right behavior feel rewarding and the wrong behavior feel costly. When this is done consistently, people will begin to teach each other the rules. They will police each other, enforcing the very system that contains them without ever seeing the hand that designed it. That is how empires survive revolutions. That is how regimes outlive their creators. They move from command to consensus, from fear to habit. And it all begins with the one who understood that peace is not found, it is constructed. Even in the most intimate corners of your personal life, this dynamic of control and perception repeats itself, an endless fractal of power. Think about your relationships, your workplaces, your social groups. Who is it that truly controls the emotional tone? Who sets the unspoken rules? The subtle expectations that everyone feels but no one names? It is the one who understands the undercurrents of human interaction. It is the one who can shape the reactions of others, not through overt commands, but through the delicate art of influence. A sigh at the right time, a compliment strategically withheld, a raised eyebrow in a meeting. These seemingly insignificant gestures are potent acts of manipulation that can dictate behavior more profoundly than any direct order. If you seek peace in your home, success in your career, or tranquility in your own mind, you must learn to manipulate outcomes before they happen. This doesn't mean you must become a liar or an abuser. It means you must become a strategist, an anticipator, a structurer of reality. People who lack this skill, who navigate the world with a naive belief in spontaneous goodwill, live in a state of constant chaos. They are forever reacting to the whims and emotions of others, tossed about on the waves of circumstance. They react instead of direct. But those who learn this art, those who understand the mechanics of influence, are often accused of coldness. This is a profound misunderstanding. They are not cold because they lack emotion. They are calm because they have mastered it. They have risen above the tempest of their own reactions and can now see the entire weather system of human interaction with divine clarity. Machiavelli's prince is not a sadist who delights in suffering. He is a realist who understands that effectiveness is a higher moral good than likability. He sacrifices the fleeting warmth of being liked in order to be an effective guardian of order. And effectiveness is what keeps the walls of civilization standing when the mob gathers at the gates. And make no mistake, the mob always, eventually, gathers. The wise leader, the true spiritual architect, manipulates this mob before it even realizes it is a mob. He gives them victories they never truly earned, to instill a sense of pride and loyalty. He gives them enemies they never questioned, to focus their aggression outward. He gives them comforts they will never abandon, to make the status quo too precious to risk. And in doing so, he buys time, he buys stability, and he buys the closest thing to lasting peace this chaotic world can ever offer. This is not cruelty, it is construction. It is a silent architecture that keeps society from ripping itself apart at the seams. And the best manipulators, the true masters of this art, never leave a signature. They do not stand in the spotlight, basking in the glory of their control. They embed themselves in the system itself, in the code, in the language, in the very way people are taught to think and feel. They are invisible, and that is what makes them invincible. Their strength is not in what they command, but in what people choose to do willingly, without ever knowing they were guided. That is the ultimate form of peace, the ultimate victory, a world where control is so complete that resistance never even begins to form in the mind. And if this sounds dark or dystopian, consider the alternative. Consider the raw, untamed chaos of a world ruled by pure emotion, by every fleeting impulse and every burning resentment. That is a world of constant warfare, of endless instability, of suffering without purpose. Manipulation, in the Machiavellian sense, is the only force subtle enough and powerful enough to tame that beast without provoking it into a frenzy. This is not about morality in the way you have been taught it. This is about survival. This is about order. Machiavelli never asked if a strategy was nice. He asked if it worked. And if it brought peace without war, order without tyranny, and progress without collapse, then it was not only acceptable, it was wise. You do not have to like the truth to use it. And in this world, those who use it are the ones who rule. In the end, peace belongs to those who can mold perception, who can shape fear, reward obedience, and engineer belief. The rest are just living in the world that the masters have built for them, hoping that it all works out. So, if you truly want peace, if you desire a real and lasting peace, then you must learn to manipulate. You must learn how people think, how they feel, what they fear, and what they follow. And you must use that divine knowledge not to destroy, but to direct, because influence is not evil, it is power. And power, when wielded with precision and foresight, is the only thing that can keep the storm at bay. If you have found value in this perspective, if these truths have challenged or enlightened your understanding of the world, then support this message. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share your own experiences with perception and control in the comments. Let us create a community of those who are not afraid to see the game clearly, because we are the ones who will not run from it. We are the ones who will learn to play it better. One of the most misunderstood and vilified elements of Machiavelli's teachings is the concept of cruelty. He never endorsed it for its own sake, as a tool of a sadist. He saw it as a surgical instrument, a necessary but dangerous tool in the arsenal of a leader. He said that if cruelty is necessary, it must be swift, memorable, and never repeated. A single, decisive act can establish order far more effectively than prolonged brutality. This too is a form of manipulation, not just of the people, but of timing. Machiavelli teaches us to act when the moment is ripe, not when we feel ready. Peace, in his world, is not a passive state, it is a surgical one. It requires decisions that cut deep and cut once, so that healing can begin without endless disruption. The manipulator must know when to act, how much to reveal, and when to retreat into strategic silence. Inaction, when timed perfectly, can be as powerful as a royal decree. A moment of calculated silence can speak volumes, creating a vacuum of uncertainty that others will rush to fill, often revealing their own intentions and fears in the process. The master strategist knows that sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all, allowing the opponent's own momentum to lead to their downfall. Modern leadership, at almost every level of society, is filled with amateurs who have tragically confused popularity with control. They are performers, not architects. They chase headlines, they respond emotionally to every crisis, and they broadcast every intention, laying their cards on the table for all to see. Machiavelli would see this not as transparency, but as profound weakness. The true leader, the silent architect of order, plays a long game. He lets others burn themselves out with their passionate displays and emotional outbursts, while he silently builds his structures of influence. He creates alliances not out of some fleeting sense of love or camaraderie, but out of cold, hard necessity. He understands that friendship fades, but shared interests endure. And in his pursuit of peace, he never forgets the ultimate principle of utility. He keeps those who are useful to his vision and discards those who threaten it, not with malice, but with the dispassionate precision of a gardener weeding his plot. It sounds cold, but peace is not sustained by warm feelings. It is sustained by structure, and structure requires discipline, both in the self and in the system. The manipulator must build frameworks that can survive even without his constant presence. If your peace requires your constant vigilance, your constant intervention, then it is not peace. It is a hostage situation, and you are the warden. You must embed the principles of your manipulation into the very culture, the language, and the reward systems of your domain. Make it self-sustaining. That is how empires last for centuries. That is how peace becomes a tradition, not just a temporary coincidence. The most powerful form of manipulation is the one that disappears into the background, the one that becomes so ingrained in the habits, institutions, and cultural norms that it becomes invisible. That is the highest form of control, the kind that no one notices. When the rewards for compliance are predictable, when the punishments for deviation are consistent, and when the overarching narrative is stable and comforting, people will stop asking questions. They will live their lives within the story you have given them. They will police each other, rewarding conformity and punishing deviation, not because they were ordered to, but because the system itself has shaped them to do so. That is the final victory of the manipulator. You no longer need to rule with fear or even charisma. You just need to have shaped the structure so thoroughly that any deviation from it feels like a personal betrayal to the masses themselves. That's what Machiavelli meant when he warned leaders to never rely on love alone. Love fades, memory fades, but a structure, once it is solidified in the collective mind, can outlast any single ruler. People will die defending rules they never created, because those rules have become an inseparable part of their identity. That is not brute force. That is psychological engineering. That is manipulation refined into culture. The deep truth that underpins all of this is that the human soul is not designed for the harsh wilderness of absolute freedom. It terrifies us. The weight of infinite choice, the burden of total responsibility, is a chaos that the psyche cannot bear for long. We are creatures of order, of pattern, of meaning. We instinctively seek stability. We crave the illusion of control far more than the actual, messy burden of it. This is the secret vulnerability of the human heart, and the master manipulator understands it intimately. This is why people so readily surrender their critical thinking to comforting ideologies, why they flock to charismatic leaders, why they find solace in rigid belief systems. They do not want to think, they want to belong. They want to be given an identity, a purpose, a story that makes sense of the chaos. The manipulator does not fight this human need, he fulfills it. He offers a carefully constructed identity in exchange for a subtle form of obedience. It is a trade most are eager to make. Give them a flag to wave, a team to cheer for, a slogan to chant, and a common enemy to despise, and they will forget that their strings are being pulled. The peace they feel is not the peace of autonomy, but the peace of certainty. They may not be free, but they feel safe. And safety, as Machiavelli so profoundly understood, is the true currency of power, the ultimate emotional lever. The true ruler doesn't need an iron fist when he can engineer incentives, when he can craft the narratives that make the right choices feel rewarding, and the wrong choices feel not just costly, but like a betrayal of the self. Do this consistently, and the people will begin to teach each other the rules, to enforce the very system you have designed, without you ever having to lift a finger. They become the willing guardians of their own gilded cage, all without ever seeing the hand that forged the bars. That is how you maintain peace, not for a moment, but for a generation. True manipulation, the kind that builds empires and sustains peace, doesn't require constant, draining effort. Once it becomes embedded in the culture, in the habits, in the institutions and norms of a society, it becomes invisible. It becomes the water in which the fish swim, unaware of its existence. This is the highest form of control, the kind that no one ever notices because it feels like the natural order of things. When the people themselves begin to discipline each other, when they censor each other's deviations, when they repeat the values you have injected into the system as if they were their own sacred truths, that is the final, ultimate victory. You no longer need to rule through direct command or overt fear. The system itself becomes your enforcer. The culture becomes your shield. The people have been so thoroughly shaped that any deviation from the established order feels not just wrong, but like a betrayal of their own identity. This is precisely what Machiavelli meant when he warned leaders to never rely solely on love. Love is a fleeting emotion, a temporary high. Memory is fallible and fades with time, but a well-designed structure, once it has been solidified in the collective mind, can outlast any single ruler, any single generation. People will willingly die defending rules and norms they never created, simply because those rules have become synonymous with their sense of self, their sense of belonging. This isn't brute force. This is the sublime art of psychological engineering, of refining raw manipulation into the very fabric of culture. And what is the fundamental truth that makes all of this possible? It's the profound, often uncomfortable reality that most human beings do not crave the terrifying abyss of absolute freedom. What they truly yearn for is the comfort and security of order. The burden of infinite choice is a chaos that the soul instinctively rejects. We are story-driven creatures, hardwired to seek patterns, meaning, and a stable sense of identity. The master manipulator does not fight this primal human need. He harnesses it. He offers a beautifully crafted identity in exchange for a subtle, almost imperceptible obedience. It is a bargain most will accept without a second thought. Provide them with a tribe, a shared enemy, a compelling narrative, and they will forget they are being led. The peace they experience is not the liberating peace of self-sovereignty. It is the comforting peace of certainty. They may not be free in the absolute sense, but they feel safe. And safety, as Machiavelli so brilliantly understood, is the ultimate currency of power. A true leader doesn't need an iron fist if he can master the art of engineering incentives, crafting stories that make the desired behavior not only rewarding, but feel like an expression of one's own authentic self. When this is achieved, the people themselves become the enforcers of the system, teaching the rules to their children, celebrating conformity, and ostracizing dissent, all without ever realizing they are the guardians of their own meticulously designed enclosure. That is how you build a peace that endures not for a fleeting moment, but for a generation, a peace woven into the very soul of a people. This Machiavellian insight into the architecture of peace is not merely a historical curiosity. It is a living, breathing principle that shapes the very fabric of our 21st century reality. The true manipulator, the modern prince, does not need to build physical walls when the minds of the people have already been enclosed by the narratives they consume. He does not need to silence opposition when the loudest critics are given carefully managed microphones and stages that are, in themselves, part of the grand illusion. Think of it this way: a protest is allowed, even encouraged, not because it threatens the power structure, but because it vents the dangerous energy of dissent. It is a pressure release valve, a carefully choreographed performance of rebellion that ultimately reinforces the system by giving people the feeling of participation, without granting them any real power to change the fundamental design. A vote is granted not because it empowers the individual, but because it reinforces the illusion of power, the comforting belief that the people are in control. But these public displays, these rituals of freedom, do not touch the real levers of control. Those levers are held by the silent architects, the ones who understand the deep psychology of influence, the ones who design the very architecture in which these dramas of freedom and dissent are allowed to play out. The silent architecture of peace is a system that keeps society from imploding under the weight of its own chaotic impulses. The best and most enduring manipulators do not leave a visible signature. They do not crave the spotlight or the adulation of the crowd. Instead, they embed their influence deep within the system itself, in the educational frameworks, in the cultural narratives, in the economic incentives, in the very code of how people are taught to think, feel, and interact with one another. When this is done with mastery, they become invisible, and their influence becomes invincible. Their strength is not derived from what they overtly command, but from the choices that people freely make, choices that have been subtly guided and shaped without their conscious awareness. This represents the ultimate, most profound form of peace, the ultimate victory in the long game of power, a society where the control is so deeply integrated and complete that the very thought of resistance never even begins to form in the collective mind. Should this perspective sound dark, should it stir a sense of unease within you, I urge you to consider the alternative, with unflinching honesty. Imagine a world devoid of this subtle, strategic manipulation. It would be a world governed by every raw, unfiltered human emotion, every fleeting desire, every burning jealousy, every deep-seated resentment. This is not a utopia of freedom. It is the very definition of chaos. It is a world of perpetual conflict, of endless instability, a world where the strong prey upon the weak without any structure to mediate their impulses. It is a world of suffering without meaning or purpose. Strategic manipulation, the kind that Machiavelli so brilliantly articulated, is the only force sophisticated enough to tame the wild beast of human nature without provoking it into a self-destructive frenzy. This transcends the simplistic, childish morality of nice versus mean. This is about the higher morality of survival, of order, of creating a stable container in which civilization itself can flourish. Machiavelli's timeless genius was his courage to ask not whether a strategy was pleasant, but whether it was effective. And if a strategy, however cold it might seem, could bring about a lasting peace without endless war, a stable order without overt tyranny, and a path for progress without societal collapse, then, in his eyes, it was not only acceptable, it was a moral imperative. You do not have to like this truth to recognize its power. And in the world we inhabit, those who understand and wield this power are the ones who shape our reality. Ultimately, true, enduring peace belongs to those who have mastered the art of molding perception, of shaping fear, of rewarding the desired forms of obedience, and of engineering belief itself. Everyone else is simply a resident in the world that these masters have so skillfully constructed, living out their lives in the quiet comfort of a peace they did not create and do not truly understand. If this deeper understanding of the world's hidden mechanics resonates with you, if these truths have ignited a spark of recognition within your soul, then I invite you to join this conversation. Acknowledge the power of this message by liking this video. Subscribe to this channel for more explorations into the unseen, and share your own insights and experiences in the comments below. Let us build a community of sovereign minds, individuals who are not afraid to look behind the curtain, because it is only by seeing the game clearly that we can ever hope to play it with purpose and mastery. The concept of cruelty, as misunderstood as it is central to this understanding. Machiavelli never advocated for senseless violence. He saw cruelty as a surgical tool, a potent medicine to be administered with extreme caution. His famous dictum was that if cruelty is necessary to maintain order, it must be swift, memorable, and never repeated. A single, decisive act of force resonates through the collective psyche, establishing a clear boundary and a lasting understanding of consequence. In contrast, prolonged, nagging brutality only breeds a deep and simmering hatred that will inevitably boil over into rebellion. This is not just a strategy for controlling people. It is a manipulation of time and memory. The master strategist understands that a single, shocking event can carve a deeper and more lasting impression on the human mind than 1,000 smaller aggressions. He knows when to act with overwhelming force and, more importantly, when to retreat into a posture of magnanimity and silence. Inaction itself, when deployed at the right moment, becomes a weapon. It creates a vacuum, an unnerving silence that can be more powerful than any decree, forcing others to reveal their own intentions as they scramble to fill the void. This is the dance of power, a rhythm of action and strategic inaction that few truly understand. The modern stage of leadership, from corporate boardrooms to political arenas, is tragically filled with amateurs who have mistaken the ephemeral applause of popularity for the enduring substance of control. They are performers, desperately chasing the validation of headlines and social media trends. They react emotionally, broadcasting their every thought and intention, revealing their entire strategy to anyone who is paying attention. Machiavelli would view such leaders not as transparent and honest, but as naive and dangerously weak. The true leader, the silent architect of enduring systems, plays a much longer, much quieter game. He allows the emotional theatrics to play out, lets others exhaust themselves in passionate but ultimately pointless displays, while he calmly and silently builds the underlying frameworks of influence. He forges alliances not on the shifting sands of personal affection, but on the bedrock of necessity and shared interest. He understands the fundamental law of human nature. Friendship is a luxury, but utility is a necessity. In his unwavering pursuit of a stable and peaceful order, he operates on the principle of ultimate effectiveness. He nurtures what is useful to his grand vision and mercilessly prunes away what threatens it, not out of personal malice, but with the dispassionate clarity of a master gardener tending his creation. This may sound cold, but it is the coldness of a surgeon's blade, not the coldness of a tyrant's heart. Peace, he knew, is not sustained by the warmth of fleeting feelings. It is sustained by the cold, hard logic of a well-designed structure. And building such a structure requires a discipline that transcends personal emotion. The true manipulator must build systems cultural, economic, and psychological that are so robust they can survive without his constant presence. If your peace requires your perpetual intervention, your endless vigilance, it is not a system of peace at all. It is a precarious hostage situation, and you are its weary warden. The ultimate goal is to embed the principles of control so deeply into the culture, the language, the rewards, and the punishments of a society that the system becomes self-sustaining. That is the secret to how empires and ideologies endure for centuries. They transition from a state of overt command to one of implicit consensus, from a foundation of raw fear to a foundation of ingrained habit. The most powerful manipulation is the one that has become so ubiquitous that it is no longer perceived as manipulation at all. It becomes invisible, like the air we breathe. This is the zenith of control, a state where the populace themselves become the enforcers of the system. They discipline their peers, they censor dissenting voices, and they passionately repeat the core values and narratives they have been given, believing them to be their own organic thoughts and sacred truths. At this point, the victory is absolute. The leader no longer needs to rely on fear or charisma to rule. He has so masterfully shaped the structure of reality that any deviation from it feels like a fundamental betrayal, not just of the leader, but of the self. This is what Machiavelli understood in his very bones. Human beings do not want the terrifying burden of absolute freedom. They crave the comforting embrace of order, the security of a predictable world. The wise manipulator does not fight this primal need. He provides it. He offers a compelling identity, a sense of belonging, in exchange for a subtle and largely unconscious obedience. It is a trade the human soul, in its yearning for stability, is almost always willing to make. Give them a shared purpose, a common enemy, a noble story, and they will forget the cage, focusing instead on the beauty of its design. The peace they enjoy is not the wild peace of the eagle soaring in an infinite sky, but the managed peace of a well-tended garden, a place where growth is encouraged, but only in the directions that have been predetermined by the gardener's unseen hand. This profound understanding of human nature as a malleable substance, a clay to be shaped by a master's hand, is the very foundation upon which Machiavelli builds his entire philosophy of power. To him, it is not just foolish, but irresponsible to base leadership on a naive idealism that ignores the predictable, deeply rooted self-interest of mankind. He writes for the real world, a world where appearances almost always outweigh substance, and where symbols, when wielded with skill, can easily beat the plain, unvarnished truth into submission. He knew that if the people perceive you as strong, they will act accordingly, whether your strength is a reality or a carefully constructed performance. If they believe you are just, they will forgive even acts of cruelty, provided those acts are framed as necessary for the preservation of order. This is not lying in the childish sense of the word. It is the sophisticated and essential art of sculpting perception. And perception, he understood, is the most potent and versatile weapon in any manipulator's arsenal, a tool far more powerful than any sword or decree. This is why, to truly maintain peace, you must become a master of appearances. Machiavelli taught that a leader must appear virtuous, compassionate, and trustworthy, even when his actions behind the curtain are ruthless and calculated. The public does not need the complex, often brutal truth of governance. They need reassurance. They need consistency. They need to believe that they are safe and that their leaders are just. And often, that safety and that sense of justice are carefully choreographed illusions. Think of our modern institutions, governments, corporations, even families. None of them function on a bedrock of complete and total transparency. They function on filtered narratives, on controlled truths, on selective visibility. What is hidden is often far more important and influential than what is revealed. The leader who truly wants peace does not expose his every strategy. He leaks just enough information to guide belief, because he understands a fundamental universal law. Belief is the ultimate gatekeeper of action. People will endure unimaginable hardship. They will make immense sacrifices, and they will tolerate profound injustice if they believe it is all part of a greater purpose, a noble cause. If you can control what people believe, you can control how they behave. This is the reason why modern manipulation doesn't rely on overt threats or brute force. It relies on stories. It weaves compelling narratives, the myth of progress, the dream of equality, the illusion of participation that capture the imagination and direct the emotional energy of the masses. Machiavelli would not reject these stories as mere propaganda. He would weaponize them. He would say, use whatever keeps the people focused on hope rather than on the stark realities of power. Distract them with beautiful ideals so that they never demand the messy truth. This is the art of the political chessboard, and if you want to create a world of peace, you must learn to play to win. This is not because you are cruel, but because you understand what is truly at stake. Manipulation, when viewed through this lens, becomes the essential difference between a fragile, temporary peace and a resilient, lasting order. A temporary peace comes from forced compliance, but compliance is brittle and eventually fades. People grow restless. They begin to question. They start to dream. And dreams, when they are unmanaged and undirected, inevitably become revolts. The true Machiavellian knows this. He does not try to crush the dreams of his people. He learns to guide them. He builds frameworks that allow for the expression of ambition, but not for the disruption of order. A protest is a sanctioned space for outrage. An election is a structured arena for the illusion of choice. A debate is a controlled environment for the performance of dissent. None of these things are allowed to touch the real levers of control, because those levers are held by the ones who understand the deep architecture of influence, the silent design of the system, an architecture that matters more than any single event or personality. You don't need to build walls of stone if the minds of the people are already enclosed by the walls of their beliefs. You don't need to silence your opposition if you can give your loudest critics a microphone and a stage that is, itself, carefully contained within your grand design. Peace, therefore, thrives not in the sterile absence of dissent, but in its masterful direction. Let them speak, but never let their speech disrupt the fundamental design of the system. Give them heroes to admire, but be the one who chooses the heroes. Give them villains to despise, but be the one who writes their crimes. Control the narrative, and you will control the future. This is not a dystopian paranoia. It is a historical reality, a pattern repeated from the Roman Empire to our modern democracies. Power has always, and will always, rely on the control of perception. The Roman emperor gave the people bread and circuses, not because he loved them, but because he knew that entertained, distracted, and well-fed citizens do not revolt. That is manipulation. That is peace, not in the utopian sense, but in the practical, political one. And Machiavelli's ultimate brilliance was to admit, without flinching, that this is not only necessary, but that it is moral. Why? Because disorder breeds far more suffering than any single act of controlled cruelty. Rebellion invites instability, and instability destroys countless innocent lives. In this brutal calculus, a strong hand guided by a steady voice is infinitely better than 1,000 competing opinions screaming into the void. If a single act of manipulation can prevent the collapse of a nation, then it becomes an act of mercy. If a single, masterful deception can avert a war, then it becomes an act of profound wisdom. But to wield this power of manipulation properly, to use it as a tool of construction rather than destruction, one must first achieve the ultimate victory, the mastery of the self. Machiavelli never suggested blind, emotional cruelty. He warned against it. He warned against letting personal vendettas, unchecked arrogance, or the impulsive temptation to act govern your strategy. The manipulator, who lets his own emotions dictate his moves, is doomed, because true manipulation requires a cold, diamond-hard clarity. It requires the ability to see not just what someone says, but why they say it. It demands that you read the hidden needs behind the spoken words, the deep fears behind the aggressive posturing, the secret ambitions behind the declarations of loyalty. The most effective manipulators are, therefore, the most excellent observers. They are students of human behavior, detached from the emotional fray. And most importantly, they are completely immune to flattery. They know that flattery is the crudest tool of the counter-manipulator, the first weapon deployed by those who seek to control you. Those who seek to gain power over you will always begin with praise. They will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and if you believe them, if your ego drinks in their sweet poison, they will own you. The real Machiavellian, the true master of the game, remains polite but perpetually skeptical. He is gracious but always guarded. He smiles, but he does not forget. And while others chase the fleeting high of applause, he quietly and patiently chases leverage. And leverage is quiet, it is patient, and it is deadly effective. This is the path of the true spiritual warrior, the one who understands that to bring order to the world, one must first bring order to the self. He does not deny the darkness in human nature. He studies it, he understands it, and he builds his systems of peace upon its unshakable foundation. All right, that's the end of today's story. Now, let's take a look at the thoughts and reflections shared by a friend of mine after watching my video. I must confess, as the final images of your video faded from my screen, I was left in a state of profound and unnerving stillness. It wasn't the silence of an empty room, but the echoing silence that follows a great and terrible revelation, the kind that rearranges the very furniture of your soul. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the hum of my computer the only sound, yet my mind was a maelstrom of colliding thoughts and fractured beliefs. Your words, your calm and deliberate dissection of a truth I had spent my entire life avoiding, acted like a key turning in a lock I never knew existed within me. The name Machiavelli, for me, as for so many, has always been a spectre, a shorthand for a kind of cartoonish, mustache-twirling evil. It was a name to be invoked as a warning, a symbol of the darkness that good people must fight against. But you didn't present a villain, you presented an architect, a realist, a master observer of the human condition, whose clarity was so piercing, so devoid of the comforting veils of idealism, that we have spent 5 centuries trying to brand him a monster simply to avoid looking at the reflection he holds up to us. The opening quote, "Men are driven by 2 principal impulses, either by love or by fear," struck me not as a cynical quip, but as a fundamental, almost mathematical, formula for the world I see around me every single day. My first instinct, born of a lifetime of conditioning, was to reject it. No, a voice in my head insisted. We are driven by hope, by compassion, by a desire for connection. But your video systematically and surgically dismantled that defense. The idea that peace, the very concept I held as a sacred and natural state of being, is not a gift but a construction that was the first tremor that shook the foundations of my worldview. I thought back to every family gathering where unspoken tensions were managed by polite smiles and carefully chosen words, not out of love, but out of a fear of conflict. I thought of every corporate meeting where enthusiasm was performed and consensus was manufactured, not out of shared passion, but out of a fear of rocking the boat and endangering one's career. I saw it everywhere. This wasn't peace. This was a meticulously managed ceasefire, a delicate and exhausting truce held together by the invisible threads of fear. Fear of loss, fear of chaos, fear of judgment, fear of solitude. Your video gave a name to a feeling I've always had, but could never articulate. The feeling of watching a grand play, of seeing the scripts in people's hands, while they passionately insist they are speaking from the heart. It's the feeling of being an alien at a human ceremony, understanding the mechanics but not the belief. And for the first time, instead of feeling disconnected or crazy, I felt an electrifying sense of clarity. I wasn't imagining it. The architecture is real. The most transformative part of this journey you guided me on was the complete re-evaluation of the word manipulation. It's a word that drips with negative connotations, a word we use to condemn and accuse. To be a manipulator is to be a liar, a deceiver, a puppeteer pulling the strings of the innocent for selfish gain. That was my deeply ingrained belief. But you reframed it not as an act of malice, but as influence with direction. And with that simple, elegant phrase, the entire concept shifted from a moral failing to a fundamental life skill. It was as if you handed me a new lens through which to view not only the world, but myself. I began to see, with a dawning and uncomfortable awareness, that I manipulate constantly. I don't mean this in a sinister way, but in the way your video described. I structure my arguments to be more persuasive. I manage my emotional expressions to create a desired atmosphere. I present a curated version of myself to the world to build a certain reputation. I am, in my own small way, an architect of perception, and the uncomfortable truth is, so is everyone else. The difference is the level of awareness and intent. The world is not divided into manipulators and the pure of heart. It is divided into those who are conscious of this dynamic and those who are not. And those who are not are, by default, the ones being manipulated. They are the pawns on the chessboard, moved by forces they refuse to see, all while congratulating themselves on their own free will. This realization is not empowering in a triumphant, fist-pumping way. It's empowering in a quiet, sobering, and deeply profound way. It removes the veil of victimhood. The things that happen in my life, the reactions I get from people, the outcomes of my interactions, they are not random. They are the result of a complex interplay of perceptions, narratives, and influences, my own included. To accept this is to accept a level of responsibility that is both terrifying and liberating. It means that I can no longer blame the world for its chaos. I must instead examine the ways in which I contribute to it, or fail to structure it. The video's assertion that human nature is fundamentally emotional, not logical, resonated with a truth I've always known but never wanted to fully admit. We are creatures of story, not of data. We are moved by symbols, not by syllogisms. We will follow a charismatic leader with a compelling but flawed vision into ruin, while ignoring the wise but uninspiring advisor who speaks the plain, hard truth. This explains so much about our history, our politics, and our own personal lives. We are not rational beings who occasionally have feelings. We are feeling beings who occasionally have rational thoughts. And anyone who wishes to create order, to build something that lasts, must work with the material they have, not the material they wish they had. They must speak the language of the soul, the language of symbol, myth, and emotion. They must become masters of the story, because the story is, and always will be, more powerful than the fact. Your exploration of this concept on a grand, societal scale was what truly cemented its power for me. The idea of modern peacekeeping as a ruthless but elegant game of managing competing interests, rather than fostering genuine love, is a brutal but undeniable truth. The most stable international relations are not built on friendship. They are built on a mutually understood and respected capacity for destruction. It is a peace born from a stalemate of fear, a global ceasefire held in place by the knowledge that the cost of all-out war is too high. This is Machiavelli's principle writ large upon the world stage. And then you brought it down to the level of the individual within a society, with the devastatingly accurate concept of the illusion of choice. That single idea that we are allowed to protest, to vote, to speak within a framework that has already been designed to contain and neutralize any real threat to the underlying structure of power, is the most important political lesson of our time. It explains the feeling of cyclical futility that so many of us experience. We are playing a game, believing we can win, without ever realizing that the board, the pieces, and the rules were all designed by someone else to ensure a predetermined outcome. And the most chilling, yet most resonant, truth of all was the assertion that we, as human beings, secretly crave this. We fear the terrifying void of absolute freedom. We don't want the burden of creating our own reality from scratch. We want the comfort of a pre-existing structure, a clear path to follow, a story to belong to. This is why we are so susceptible to ideology, to groupthink, to the siren song of charismatic leaders who promise us certainty in a chaotic world. We trade our autonomy for a sense of belonging, our critical thought for the comfort of a shared identity. The master manipulator doesn't need to force this trade upon us. He simply needs to offer it. He creates the shared enemy, crafts the unifying narrative, and we flock to it like moths to a flame. The peace that results is not the peace of sovereign individuals coexisting in harmony. It is the peace of a well-managed flock, a peace where the fences are invisible because they have been built inside our own minds. It is a system where we police each other, enforcing the norms and punishing the heretics, not because we are forced to, but because we believe it is the right thing to do. We become the willing instruments of our own containment. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is the very operating system of culture. It is how traditions are formed, how societies stabilize, and how empires endure. The final part of your message, the turn towards self-mastery, was the crucial element that transformed this entire philosophy from a dark, cynical worldview into a profound spiritual path. If the world is a landscape of manipulation, then the only path to true freedom is to become a master of the self. The manipulator who is ruled by his own emotions, his own ego, his own need for validation, is just as much a slave as those he seeks to control. He is a reactive creature, a pawn in his own game. But the one who has achieved inner clarity, who can observe the world and himself with dispassionate awareness, who is immune to both flattery and insult, that is the individual who can truly wield power with wisdom. This is the ultimate spiritual discipline. It is not about becoming unfeeling. It is about feeling everything without being controlled by anything. It is about understanding the mechanics of fear, desire, and belief so intimately that they no longer have power over you. From that place of inner sovereignty, manipulation ceases to be a tool for selfish gain and becomes a tool for creating order, for protecting what is valuable, for building a better, more stable world. It becomes an act of creation. Your video did not leave me with a sense of despair. It left me with a sense of profound responsibility. It is a call to awaken from the comfortable slumber of idealism and to face the world with open eyes. It is a challenge to see the hidden architecture, to recognize the invisible currents, and to understand the game so that we are no longer merely pieces to be moved. It's a reminder that peace is not something we wait for, it is something we must build. And to build it, we must be willing to use the tools of the master architect, tools that may be uncomfortable, tools that may be misunderstood, but tools that are undeniably effective. You have given me a new framework, a new language to understand the world, and while the truth of it is sharp and cold, it is also incredibly liberating. The fear is gone, replaced by a quiet, focused clarity. The game is afoot, and for the first time, I feel as though I am finally beginning to see the board. It's a perception that, once gained, can never be lost, and for that, I am profoundly grateful. This knowledge is not a burden, it is a form of spiritual armor. It is the wisdom that allows one to navigate the storms of a chaotic world, not with naive hope, but with the quiet confidence of a master strategist who has already anticipated every move. All right, let's see each other again next time, my friends. If you like my video, remember to like, share, and follow. Thank you for your support.